The cameras flickered on, the studio lights bathing the room in a harsh, unrelenting glow. Kash Patel leaned back in his chair, smirk curling at the edges of his face, exuding that familiar air of unshakable confidence. He didn't just speak. He dominated the space, cutting over the host with practiced arrogance, each word landing like a hammer striking a nail. To anyone watching, it was the same old pattern: bold claims, deflections, and that smug certainty that made him feel untouchable. Millions of eyes were glued to the screen, scrolling feeds already buzzing with anticipation, the tension palpable even through the glass of countless living rooms. And then, without warning, Jasmine Crockett spoke. Not hesitantly, not politely. She spoke with precision, clarity, and a fire that immediately pierced the artificial calm of the broadcast. Her words sliced through the chatter, each syllable landing with undeniable authority. "That's not just wrong," she said, her voice steady yet unyielding. "It's a betrayal of every promise made to the people you claim to serve." The studio went silent. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Cameras panned across stunned faces, some incredulous, some whispering into earpieces, trying to process the unexpected turn. Patel's smirk faltered. A flicker of doubt passed across his features, just for a moment, enough for the audience to sense that his control over the room was no longer absolute. Social media feeds erupted simultaneously, trending hashtags, frantic clips, and comments flooding in from viewers who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. It was one of those rare moments where history felt alive, where a single rebuttal could ignite conversations from coast to coast. Crockett's gaze never wavered, her posture a portrait of calm determination. Every word she spoke carried the weight of her experiences, her struggles, and her relentless dedication to truth. The contrast was stark: arrogance on one side, dignity on the other. And in that electric pause, the nation collectively leaned in, holding its breath. No one expected this moment, and the nation went silent. For viewers at home, it was more than a debate. It was a revelation. And just as hearts pounded and eyes widened, the unthinkable was about to happen. But what happened next left the entire country in disbelief. This wasn't just another televised debate. From the moment the cameras turned on, the tension in the room mirrored the anxiety of a nation divided. Millions of Americans were watching, their eyes glued to screens, their fingers hovering over keyboards, ready to react in real time. In the age of viral moments, a single misstep could dominate headlines, flood social media feeds, and define reputations overnight. Every word mattered, every pause calculated. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were personal, political, and historic. Kash Patel's confidence had been unshakable, cultivated over years of interviews, press briefings, and strategic soundbites. To his supporters, he represented clarity, toughness, a voice willing to speak truth over nuance. But to millions more, his bravado was a mask for arrogance, his interruptions a strategy to drown out dissent, and his rhetoric a carefully constructed armor against accountability. The air in the studio crackled as viewers recognized the pattern: dominance versus distraction, deception versus dignity. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, carried the weight of history and expectation in her calm, steady gaze. Every syllable she uttered hinted at preparation, conviction, and an unwavering commitment to principle. She understood the theater she was in, not as a stage for ego, but as a battleground where integrity would be tested against manipulation. The audience could sense it. Here was a woman who would not flinch, who would not compromise the truth, and whose very presence challenged the arrogance that had long gone unchecked. Across the nation, partisans on both sides held their collective breath. Social media monitors reported surges in activity even before the debate had reached its halfway mark. Hashtags began trending, clips were being edited and shared, and political commentators whispered into their earpieces, trying to predict who would gain the upper hand. The outcome wasn't just about a single moment of debate. It was a referendum on power, credibility, and who could claim moral authority in a climate of constant scrutiny. The contrast could not have been starker. Patel's words were rapid, rehearsed, almost mechanical. Crockett's responses were deliberate, precise, and infused with moral weight. Each interjection, each rebuttal, carried consequences that extended far beyond the studio. The nation was watching not only to see who would win the argument, but to witness a confrontation of values. Truth versus deception, humility versus hubris, dignity versus unchecked arrogance. Every eye was trained on the unfolding drama, every mind calculating the stakes. Would Patel's bravado hold under scrutiny, or would the cracks finally show? Could Crockett turn the momentum in her favor and leave a mark that history would remember? The tension built with each passing second, an invisible weight pressing down on every viewer, every journalist, every voter scanning the feeds. And just when it seemed Patel had the upper hand, Crockett made a move that stunned everyone. Kash Patel didn't arrive on the national stage by accident. From his earliest roles in government, he cultivated an image of efficiency, intelligence, and unshakable composure. To some, he was a rising star, someone who navigated complex bureaucracies with the confidence of a seasoned operator. To others, though, that confidence teetered dangerously close to arrogance, a mask for a relentless ambition that tolerated no challenge, no scrutiny, and certainly no opposition. Every move, every interview, every carefully staged appearance reinforced the persona he wanted the public to believe: unflappable, authoritative, untouchable. On television, Patel became almost theatrical in his dominance. He interrupted hosts mid-sentence, spoke over analysts, and wielded facts selectively, framing them to bolster his narrative while dismissing any opposing perspective as irrelevant or misguided. There was a pattern, one viewers noticed after a few appearances, and one that fueled both admiration and growing frustration. For a segment of the audience, Patel's assertiveness was proof of courage, a refusal to be politically correct or restrained by convention. For millions more, it felt aggressive, dismissive, and increasingly performative. It was as if he had mastered the art of seeming infallible while actively alienating anyone who demanded accountability. Social media chronicled these moments with ruthless precision. Clips of him cutting off opponents, laughing dismissively, or turning an uncomfortable question into a punchline circulated endlessly. Comment threads lit up with outrage. How can anyone let him speak over the host like that? Unbelievable again? He thinks he's untouchable, but everyone's watching. The digital audience, untethered from the broadcast's polished veneer, began to see cracks. Even those who respected his intellect noticed the arrogance that so often overshadowed substance. It was this duality, admired by some, reviled by others, that made him a figure so compelling, so polarizing. Patel's career trajectory only reinforced this persona. Positions of influence, high-profile policy roles, and media appearances all fed into a self-assured narrative. He was always the smartest person in the room. Yet beneath the surface of his polished public image lay a recurring vulnerability: overconfidence. Time and again, small miscalculations, moments of unguarded hubris, or underestimating an opponent's resilience exposed him. In private conversations leaked to the press, aides noted his impatience with dissent, his tendency to over-explain when challenged, and the rare but telling flashes of frustration when reality didn't bend to his will. These weren't weaknesses in intellect, they were weaknesses in temperament, a subtle crack in the armor he presented to the world. This pattern of behavior had cultivated both loyalty and deep resentment. His base cheered every confident dismissal of critics, every pointed jab at opposing figures, every performative flourish meant to assert dominance. Meanwhile, progressives, moderates, and even skeptics within his own sphere watched, often incredulous, as he repeated the same behaviors that had tripped him up before. They shared screenshots, viral clips, and commentary, almost in disbelief that someone could so consistently appear untouchable, yet so prone to the pitfalls of unchecked pride. And that was precisely the danger Patel rarely acknowledged. When arrogance meets someone prepared, principled, and unwavering, the stage is set for a reckoning. The very traits that had carried him to the center of attention, the smirks, the interruptions, the confident proclamations, were the traits that could at any moment undo him. Every viewer who had rolled their eyes at a past performance, every commentator who predicted his downfall in hushed tones, sensed it. The inevitability that his overconfidence was a powder keg waiting for a spark. The audience, both live in the studio and across the nation, could feel it building in the air that night. They had watched him dominate interviews, dismiss opponents, and craft an image of invulnerability. They had learned, through repeated spectacle, that he was as brilliant as he was reckless, as commanding as he was careless. And now, as the debate unfolded, that familiar pattern loomed large. Every confident assertion, every dismissive glance, every smirk carried weight, but also the hint of impending consequence. Because if history had taught them anything, it was that arrogance, no matter how polished, never goes unchallenged. And for Kash Patel, the challenge had arrived in a form he could not have predicted. Someone calm, principled, and unafraid, to expose the cracks beneath his carefully constructed facade. The audience leaned forward, hearts racing with anticipation and a quiet thrill, knowing that for the first time, the man who had seemed untouchable might finally meet his match. Jasmine Crockett's story didn't begin on a television set or in the glare of political cameras. It began in communities often overlooked, in neighborhoods where opportunity was scarce, and where the weight of inequality was felt in every school, every clinic, every local business struggling to survive. From an early age, she learned that leadership was not about appearances or applause. It was about action, about showing up when it mattered most. Her parents worked long hours, instilling in her a sense of responsibility, resilience, and a belief that integrity was not negotiable. Every challenge she faced, every obstacle she overcame, became a thread in the fabric of her character, preparing her for battles that would one day unfold far beyond her hometown. Her rise in politics was neither swift nor easy. Crockett cut her teeth in local advocacy, volunteering in community centers, mentoring youth, and fighting for policies that often went unnoticed by the broader public. She wasn't seeking headlines, she was seeking results. Every meeting with a concerned parent, every long night poring over legislation, every speech delivered in small community halls built the foundation of a politician who knew the stakes weren't abstract. They were deeply personal. And through it all, she carried herself with a quiet determination that few could mistake. She would never compromise her principles, no matter the pressure or the audience. Along the way, Crockett faced personal sacrifice that could have derailed a less resilient person. Long nights away from family, intense scrutiny from both political allies and adversaries, and moments of doubt tested her resolve. But each challenge reinforced what she had always known. Leadership was not about ego or spectacle or political theater. It was about courage, accountability, and a relentless pursuit of justice. The trials she endured shaped her into a figure who could stand calmly, even when the world seemed intent on chaos, who could meet arrogance with composure, and who could wield moral clarity as a weapon far more powerful than bluster. It was these experiences that made her uniquely prepared for the moment she now faced on live television. While her opponent relied on rehearsed lines, interruptions, and the theatrics of self-assured dominance, Crockett relied on something far rarer: preparation rooted in principle. She had spent years listening, learning, and understanding the impact of decisions on real people. Every story she had heard, every injustice she had witnessed, Every victory she had earned through persistence and integrity gave her the calm confidence that now radiated through her every word, every gesture, every poised response. Audiences at home, even those unfamiliar with her biography, could sense it. The air around her seemed to hum with quiet authority. There was no need for smirks, no need for raised voices. The power she carried was not performative. It was earned. And in a room where many were accustomed to the loudest voice winning, her measured presence stood out like a beacon of clarity. People watching began to feel it instinctively. This wasn't just politics. This was personal integrity in action. Every interruption from her opponent, every attempt to unsettle her, met with unwavering composure, only magnified the contrast. Crockett's empathy was also her strength. She understood the fears and hopes of the people watching. She knew that millions of viewers saw more than a debate. They saw their own struggles reflected in the issues at stake. Her words were carefully chosen not only for accuracy, but for resonance, connecting policy to human lives. It was this combination of intellect, preparation, and humanity that made her a figure audiences could root for. A hero not because of charisma alone, but because she embodied the values they themselves cherished: courage, justice, and unwavering dedication to the truth. And while Patel's arrogance had often left audiences rolling their eyes or shaking their heads in frustration, Crockett's calm strength inspired hope. She carried the knowledge that she could challenge deception without descending into theatrics, that she could expose hubris without stooping to mockery, and that she could maintain her dignity while commanding attention. Every choice she had made, every lesson she had learned, had led to this very moment, under the unforgiving gaze of live television, with the nation watching, hashtags trending in real time, and pundits already bracing for the impact of her words. Even before she spoke her first retort that night, the air in the studio was charged with anticipation. The audience could feel it, the kind of quiet tension that precedes something unforgettable. There was a sense, almost instinctual, that this woman had been shaped by struggle, hardened by principle, and prepared to deliver a defining moment that would not merely win an argument, but remind the nation what leadership grounded in integrity could look like. And as Patel's smirk wavered under the first flickers of her composed defiance, it became clear. The stage was set. The stakes had never been higher, and the audience was about to witness a confrontation that would be remembered far beyond the studio walls. The debate had entered a territory few had predicted, and the tension in the studio was almost tangible. Kash Patel, sensing the audience's shifting energy, leaned into his familiar strategy. Rapid-fire interruptions, clipped dismissals, and a barrage of pointed jabs meant to corner Jasmine Crockett. Each time she attempted to complete a thought, he spoke over her, smirking as if to say the room and the nation belonged to him. "You're missing the facts," he barked, voice tight with forced authority. "Let me explain this clearly for everyone watching." But Crockett didn't flinch. She maintained a poised composure, letting Patel's theatrics unfold around her like a storm that would eventually pass. She matched his intensity not with volume, but with precision, answering his assertions with clarity and unwavering confidence. Her tone was steady, measured, calm, each word chosen to puncture deception without descending into the chaos Patel seemed to thrive on. The contrast was stark: arrogance against dignity, bluster against preparation. The studio, usually accustomed to Patel's control, seemed to shift under the weight of her composure. The audience could feel it, both live and across the millions of screens tuned in. Social media feeds exploded with reactions. "This is insane," trended in mere seconds. Clips of Patel cutting off Crockett circulated instantly, with thousands of viewers praising her restraint. "She's handling him like a pro." Memes began forming in real time, side-by-side comparisons of Patel's smirk versus Crockett's unwavering gaze. Every interruption, every raised eyebrow from Patel became fodder for the nation to dissect, tweet, and debate. The audience wasn't just watching. They were participating, caught in a shared, almost electric moment of collective anticipation. Patel, for all his prior confidence, was visibly rattled. His hand twitched slightly on the desk, his voice occasionally faltering when Crockett calmly countered his points. A bead of sweat traced his temple, unnoticed by some but obvious to those watching closely. It was the first crack in his carefully constructed armor, the first sign that arrogance alone could not dominate a prepared, principled opponent. Yet he refused to yield, doubling down on aggression, misdirection, and rhetorical flourish, as if sheer force of will could reclaim the upper hand. Crockett, on the other hand, leaned into the mounting tension with strategic precision. She anticipated each attempt to unsettle her, each sarcastic remark or dismissive gesture, and transformed it into an opportunity to reinforce her arguments. Every calm response carried weight. Every carefully framed point underscored her command of both facts and moral authority. The nation watching could almost feel the rhythm of the exchange. Patel pushing, Crockett absorbing, turning, and reflecting each challenge back with surgical accuracy. The contrast drew admiration and validation from viewers. Progressive audiences saw in Crockett the embodiment of values long overshadowed by spectacle: patience, clarity, and unshakable principle. They felt relief, pride, and even a spark of inspiration as they witnessed someone stand firm under pressure, refusing to be manipulated or silenced. Comments poured in. Finally, someone holding him accountable. Her composure is unmatched. This is what leadership looks like. The tension escalated with every passing minute. Patel's attempts to dominate were becoming increasingly frantic, his words losing the polish of certainty and gaining the tremor of desperation. The studio audience shifted in their seats. The energy was electric, a mixture of suspense, disbelief, and anticipation. Every viewer knew a turning point was imminent, that the battle of wit and principle had reached a critical crescendo. And then, with one sentence, Crockett turned the entire debate upside down. For a moment, the studio went silent. The cameras cut to Kash Patel's face, his smirk faltering as Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her expression calm, her voice steady, yet carrying the undeniable weight of truth. Every eye in the room seemed to focus on her, every microphone capturing the precision of her words, as though the air itself held its breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the culmination of years spent listening, learning, and shaping arguments grounded in principle and evidence. "Let's be clear," she began, her tone firm but unshakably composed. "The claims you've made tonight are not just misleading. They contradict the record. Policies you've championed have repeatedly undermined the communities you claim to serve. And the statistics, the reports, the testimonies are all there, for the public to see." She paused deliberately, letting the statement sink in. The pause was more than theatrical. It was strategic. Each heartbeat in the studio seemed to echo, amplifying the tension. Even Patel, usually so quick to fill silence, hesitated. Crockett continued, threading her words like a scalpel through the fabric of his rhetoric. "You speak of transparency, yet you have consistently resisted accountability. You speak of defending the people, yet your actions tell a different story. Let's not confuse confidence with competence." Cameras cut between her calm gaze and Patel's stiffening posture. His eyes darted briefly to the host, searching for intervention, searching for a lifeline, but there was none. The studio, the nation, and the live feeds were all watching, collectively bearing witness. Social media erupted instantly. Comments and hashtags flooded feeds in real time. Crockett Clapback trending worldwide. "Did you see that? She just dismantled him with facts." Memes began forming within minutes, juxtaposing Patel's faltering expression with Crockett's unwavering composure. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, hearts pounding in sync with the rising tension. For the first time in years, many felt what it was like to witness the arrogant being held accountable in a way that was not only factual, but undeniably righteous. She didn't rush. Every revelation, every contradiction, every logical dismantling was delivered with careful pacing, each sentence building like chapters in a story the nation couldn't look away from. You claim to fight corruption, yet your record shows repeated attempts to sidestep oversight. You claim to champion fairness, yet your decisions consistently benefit the few at the expense of the many. And tonight, the American people are watching, and they deserve clarity. Another pause. Another wave of collective suspense. The studio lights seemed brighter now, illuminating the sharp contrast between their postures. One poised, one unraveling. Patel's responses became erratic, stammering around her points, trying to regain footing but unable to stop the tide. That's not... well, I mean... His words trailed off, as if the air itself had swallowed them. For all his previous dominance, for all the interruptions, the rehearsed lines, the carefully cultivated smirk, nothing prepared him for the calm, unassailable authority Crockett projected. The audience could sense it. He was no longer in control, and she had seized the narrative completely. Crockett's strategy was clear. She was not merely responding. She was reframing the debate. Every fact she presented, every contradiction she exposed, turned the arena of contention into a showcase of principle triumphing over posturing. And the audience felt it. Each gasp from the studio crowd, each cheer, each whispered exclamation from those watching remotely, reinforced the emotional resonance. Finally, viewers seemed to think, someone is calling out arrogance with clarity and courage. It was a collective catharsis, a vicarious victory against the kind of ego-driven manipulation that had dominated the airwaves for too long. And then came the final blow. Crockett leaned slightly closer to the microphone, her voice unwavering, cutting through the tension like a knife. The American people are not fooled by spectacle or bravado. They see through it, and they will remember that integrity, diligence, and accountability matter far more than the performance of a loudmouth who refuses to answer for his actions. The studio fell completely silent, every word ringing with moral authority. Cameras lingered on Patel, whose face now betrayed genuine uncertainty, the veneer of invincibility cracking in real time. The audience erupted. Applause, cheers, and murmurs of disbelief cascaded across the studio. Patrons who had been tense or skeptical were now openly celebrating her victory, their reactions magnified across digital platforms. Clips of Crockett's calm, decisive dismantling of Patel flooded feeds instantly, and within minutes it was impossible to scroll without seeing the phrase, "By Crockett wins," trending. The moment transcended politics. It became an emotional release, a reaffirmation that truth and integrity could prevail over arrogance and manipulation. Patel tried to speak again, but his words stumbled over themselves. He had relied on speed, interruption, and confidence to dominate. Yet here, under the precise light of Crockett's reasoning, none of it worked. His voice was uneven, his composure shattered. Even his loyal supporters watching at home began to question, to reconsider, to feel the weight of the contradictions she had exposed. The contrast was undeniable, arrogance exposed, principle victorious. Every pause, every calculated sentence from Crockett had heightened the drama. The audience didn't just watch. They felt the victory as if it were their own, experiencing the satisfaction of seeing deception challenged, manipulation dismantled, and dignity prevailing. It was a collective exhale, a surge of hope and validation that resonated far beyond the studio walls. The nation had witnessed more than a debate. It had witnessed a reckoning, a defining moment in which preparation, integrity, and courage silenced hubris in real time. And as Crockett concluded her measured yet devastating takedown, The nation, still holding its breath, realized one thing. For the first time in this debate, the scales had truly tipped, and no amount of arrogance could undo the clarity, precision, and moral authority she had brought to the stage. The room remained charged with electricity, hearts pounding, eyes wide, as the world waited to see what Patel would do next, knowing that the aftermath of this moment would reverberate far beyond the studio lights, far beyond the debate, and into the very conscience of the nation. The moment Crockett delivered her devastating takedown, the air seemed to hum with a collective energy that no one in the studio, or across the nation, could ignore. Within seconds, social media feeds exploded. Clips of her calm, precise dismantling of Patel were shared, reshared, and dissected endlessly. Trending hashtags erupted like wildfire. Crockett Clapback, integrity wins, debate of the century. Viewers posted reaction videos, some in tears, others cheering, all expressing a shared sense of awe and vindication. Memes formed in real time, juxtaposing Patel's faltering confidence with Crockett's composed authority. The nation was watching, participating, and amplifying the moment with unprecedented velocity. Commentators across networks scrambled to respond, their analysis blending shock with reluctant admiration. Pundits who had anticipated Patel's dominance were forced to revise their scripts mid-broadcast. "We've rarely seen a performance like this," one commentator admitted, voice tinged with awe. "Even those critical of her politics can't deny the precision and authority she displayed tonight." Across newsrooms, experts parsed every phrase, every fact, every pause, highlighting the sheer strategic brilliance of her delivery. Analysts noted how Crockett not only countered Patel, but reframed the narrative, shifting the debate from spectacle to principle in real time. The ripple effect extended far beyond the studio. Politicians on both sides of the aisle weighed in, some cautiously praising her composure, others openly acknowledging the skill and courage it took to confront Patel so publicly. Celebrities and public figures, quick to amplify moments of cultural significance, flooded social media with reactions. Clips of her rebuttal circulated with captions like, "This is leadership," and "We need more politicians like her." Even opponents, who often dismissed her voice, were forced to recognize the impact. "That was something," one political rival tweeted. Crockett handled herself with undeniable authority. The nation collectively witnessed a rare moment, where charisma, preparation, and principle converged to command attention. Audiences at home experienced the moment in a uniquely personal way. For progressive-leaning viewers, immigrant communities, and identity-pride-driven audiences, Crockett's triumph was not merely a win on a debate stage, it was validation. It represented the possibilities of courage under pressure, of integrity, overcoming arrogance, and of voices often overlooked rising to demand respect. Viewers flooded comment sections and discussion threads, sharing personal reflections. Finally, someone standing up for truth. "I feel seen. This is why I believe in principled leadership." The sense of shared triumph was palpable, the emotional resonance magnified by the collective nature of online communities witnessing history unfold together. News cycles immediately pivoted. The story dominated morning broadcasts, evening summaries, and trending lists across platforms. Analysts dissected the tactics, the facts, and the subtle psychological strategies Crockett employed. Opinion columns declared it a defining political moment, framing her performance as a benchmark for how integrity, preparation, and moral clarity can prevail in an arena often dominated by ego and spectacle. The debate itself, once expected to be a minor skirmish, now became a case study in public accountability, media dynamics, and the transformative power of truth delivered with confidence. The cultural impact was equally profound. Hashtags persisted across hours and days, sparking conversations about leadership, representation, and civic engagement. Schools, civic groups, and online forums debated the implications. What did this mean for accountability? For public discourse? For young people seeing a figure like Crockett stand unflinching before power, composed and unafraid? The moment had transcended politics. It had become a shared emotional event, a story people wanted to tell and retell, a collective memory forming in real time. This was no ordinary debate. History was being made in real time. And indeed, for the nation watching, it felt monumental. Patel's faltering confidence, Crockett's unwavering poise, the ripple effects through newsrooms, social feeds, and civic spaces, it all added up to a narrative bigger than any individual moment. People weren't just watching a clash of personalities. They were witnessing a moral reckoning, a symbolic victory for those who believed that courage, preparation, and dignity could still reshape the public stage. As discussions continued to explode online and across airwaves, the audience's sense of validation deepened. They had seen arrogance challenged, deception exposed, and integrity celebrated. Viewers felt part of something larger, part of a movement that extended beyond politics and into the very essence of shared values. And as the world absorbed the implications, the tension from the debate gave way to reflection and anticipation. What would come next, and how would the nation respond to a performance that had already begun to reshape expectations of leadership and accountability? As the applause and cheers slowly subsided, Jasmine Crockett's voice carried a calm finality that resonated far beyond the studio walls. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't basking in the spectacle. Instead, she framed the night's confrontation with a clarity that cut through the noise, transforming what had been a clash of personalities into a lesson in dignity, truth, and public service. Tonight wasn't about winning a debate, she said, her tone steady and resolute. It was about standing up for what is right, about showing that honesty, integrity, and courage matter more than arrogance, deception, or theatrics. The statement struck a chord with audiences everywhere. Millions had watched as she dismantled rhetoric built on ego and misinformation. But now they realized the larger victory was symbolic. Crockett had reframed the confrontation as a testament to values that transcended politics: fairness, accountability, and civic responsibility. In a moment dominated by spectacle, she reminded the nation that leadership grounded in principle could inspire, unify, and uplift. This was not just a personal triumph. It was a reaffirmation of the ideals many Americans held dear, especially those who had long felt marginalized, dismissed, or silenced. She continued, her cadence measured, each word chosen for maximum impact. When the loudest voices try to overshadow the truth, it is our responsibility to rise above, to speak with clarity, and to act with courage. Integrity, composure, and dedication are stronger than any display of arrogance. And when we live these values, when we practice them in public and private life, we create a society where accountability and respect are not optional. They are expected. Her gaze swept across the studio, and by extension the nation, carrying an almost tangible sense of moral certainty. For viewers, the emotional payoff was immediate and profound. Progressive audiences, immigrant communities, and those who cherished identity and representation felt validated. They had witnessed a tangible example of virtue prevailing over ego. Her composure became a mirror for their own aspirations: to confront challenges with courage, to defend principles without compromising dignity, and to trust that truth, when wielded wisely, could silence even the most overconfident adversaries. Every clap, every social media post, every shared clip now carried a deeper resonance. A collective celebration of values triumphing over spectacle. Crockett's lesson was not abstract. It was actionable. She tied her performance to the responsibilities of citizenship, reminding Americans that democracy relies not only on voices in power, but on the vigilance, engagement, and moral courage of the people. We are all participants in shaping the future, she said. Our communities, our votes, our voices matter. And when we demand accountability, when we insist on truth and integrity, we strengthen the foundation of this nation. Her words evoked pride and reflection, tying the debate to the universal values of justice, fairness, and Americanness, connecting individual actions to collective responsibility. The crescendo of inspiration was palpable. Crockett's composure, her unwavering, moral clarity, became more than a rhetorical victory. It became a blueprint for action. Audiences felt uplifted, empowered to emulate the same courage in their own lives, whether standing up to injustice in their communities, advocating for truth in their workplaces, or engaging in civic duties that demanded diligence and integrity. She had shown that leadership was not about theatrics or dominance. It was about steadfast adherence to principle, patience under pressure, and the ability to communicate truth with unwavering clarity. By the time the broadcast concluded, the nation understood the magnitude of the moment. What had started as a tense, high-stakes debate had become a testament to the power of integrity and courage. Crockett's victory was not merely personal, it was emblematic, a demonstration that virtue, preparation, and ethical clarity could overcome intimidation, arrogance, and deception. In that shared experience, viewers felt not only satisfaction, but a renewed sense of purpose. And as the audience reflected on what they had witnessed, one truth became undeniable: integrity, courage, and composure can silence even the loudest critics. In an era often dominated by spectacle and sound bites, Jasmine Crockett had proven that values grounded in truth and public service remain the most powerful forces of all. Her message lingered, echoing in homes, on social media, and in conversations across the nation. Dignity and principle are not relics of the past. They are the foundation for a stronger, more just future. The debate had ended, but the impact of that single moment, Jasmine Crockett, silencing Kash Patel with clarity, dignity, and unwavering principle, resonated across the nation. Millions had watched, millions had reacted, and millions more would continue to feel the ripple effects for days, weeks, and months to come. It was more than a debate clip. It was a defining moment, a vivid illustration that truth, integrity, and courage can prevail even in the most hostile arenas. The headline wasn't just about a fiery clapback, it was about standing up, calmly and confidently, against arrogance and deception. And that's the lesson we take away. In our own lives, whether in our communities, workplaces, or personal relationships, the courage to speak truth, to defend integrity, and to act with principle matters. It's not always easy, and the challenges can feel overwhelming, but Crockett's performance reminds us that steadfastness and preparation can turn moments of confrontation into opportunities for impact. If this moment inspired you, share it. Let others see what it looks like to stand firm, to speak truth, and to act with purpose. Subscribe to stay connected to stories that highlight courage, accountability, and the power of integrity in action. Join the conversation online, engage in civic dialogue, and remind yourself that your voice, your actions, and your values make a difference every single day. Because moments like these are proof. Standing up for truth isn't just political, it's personal, it's empowering, and it can change the course of events. So keep watching, keep learning, and keep standing for what's right. The world notices. Your actions matter. And together, we shape a future where integrity, courage, and dignity are never optional. They are the standard.